Hey, my name is Mitch Marcello, and I love talking to people about creativity and talking about why creativity is needed inside of our thought process in Christianity and inside of our churches. One of the things that we talked about just grounding our time is something called the cultural mandate and how we're invited to play and to explore inside of this good, very, very good creation. One of the things that is most important for us to understand is that God is a creative God, and there's an invitation for us as we're invited into this partnering with God in the restoration of all things, that we get to see God in new ways and we get to experience God in new ways. And specifically with preaching, why it's so important for us, there's a number of different reasons that we talked about, but how we need to learn that there is, and be reminded that our congregations are comprised of people that learn and think in very different ways. And when we're creative, we have an opportunity to connect the story of the gospel with our congregation in ways that helps them connect it with their own personal life in profound and transformative ways. We also talked about this thing called the 4 C's of creativity. So we talk about the neuroscience throughout this. And one of the conceptual concepts of creativity is this thing called the 4 C's. Now, traditionally, when people think of creativity, what they think of are these very large endeavors, these big paint experiments or glitter being thrown all over the place. And that can be what happens. But the 4 C's of creativity helps us understand that there are these different levels of creativity. It starts with mini C. So the first is mini C creativity, and that's where creativity is creative to you and to you alone. And so the example I like to use is that if there's lasagna in my, or if there's onions rather in my lasagna, that would be creative to me because I think onions are gross. But it's something that is novel and that it's useful. That our definition of creativity is that it has to be both new and it has to be useful to the context that we find ourselves. But so that would be new and useful to me, albeit gross. Now, then we move to little c, and that's where it's creative to your personal context. And so it could be that your church has never done a dinner church experience, but many other churches have. However, little c creativity says, pay attention to that, lean into that. Let's figure out how we as a congregation or our small network are able to do things that we haven't experienced before, and let's do that together. Then it moves to pro C, and pro C creativity is where it's creative in the professional realm that maybe no other preacher or preachers in general haven't done this. And then that gets to big C creativity. And big C creativity are things that change the entire world. The wheel is invented, we're flying for the first time. But the most important thing to know about this is that, first of all, we're all creative. And if we're curious about what we are going to be creative around, is that mini C creativity, that leads us into these other forms of creativity. It starts small. What are you curious about? How can you pay attention to that? What turns your head a quarter of an inch that you can pay attention to in this good, very good creation? We then move to talk about how limitations are really important for us. That if I were to ask you to create a game, just any game, make up a game, you might sit there and your brain might go blank. But if I were to say, create a game with a chair and with a shoe, you might be able to come up with a game really quick. And this is true for your preaching. And this is true for your creative aspect, that when we have something for our brains to connect with and associate with the task that we are trying to accomplish, it'll help us come up with new synapses and be creative that much more effectively and quickly. Finally, it wouldn't be a creativity session without good brainstorming. But so although brainstorming and creativity are not synonymous, many people think they're one and the same thing. Now, coming up with ideas are really important, but there's good ways to do that and there's bad ways to do that. There's more effective ways to do that and there's less effective ways to do that. Such as, did you know that group brainstorming is largely less effective than individual brainstorming. But there's good ways to do it. So we use this thing called the lotus blossom to help us brainstorm. But inside of it, we talked about something called divergent thinking and something called convergent thinking. And they're two sides of the same coin. But divergent thinking is our ability to come up with lots of different ideas, to explore different possibilities. And convergent thinking is deciding which idea that we really want to land on. And when we're able to disconnect them and separate them, give ourselves space to play, to explore, to come up with these different ideas together as a group. And then once we have those ideas, to then decide what are we going to do with these ideas, which ideas are best ideas, then we're actually able to enter into like a season thinking or a process thinking of how do we go into these seasons and then go into the next season. So with all of that, it's been an incredible opportunity to explore 178 different ideas of how we can be more creative in our preaching. That was the final result. And how we can honor God and how we can serve our congregations and connect the message of Jesus Christ in new and beautiful and appropriate, useful ways with the people that we serve day in and day out.